Hello, Tone. Jen, can you give us a ring, please?
Hi, anyway, Tom, when you listen to messages, could you ring me, please? Because I'm sick at the moment. I can't speak to you. Bye. Hi, it's only me. Time's nearly 2:05, still haven't heard from you. Can you just give us a ring, please, let us know you're alright? Because at the moment I think you're dead. Because you just said on the telly that there's 3 men in Range Rover. I think it's you. Bye.
The arrest of Darren Nichols in relation to the importation of the cannabis when I was on the regional crime squad. My involvement was literally just that day and the arrest of him, although the rest of my team were involved in a bit more around the importation side of things. And that was it really. Made a set of notes, wrote a statement, and that was the last I really heard of it. Didn't have any more dealings with it at all. Obviously, there was lots of rumours and stuff that were flying around at the time.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Lots of rumours flying around at the time, but didn't know Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. They weren't major criminals as such. They were a local drugs problem in relation to the Basildon area. The reason they come to sort of notice was because of the death of Leah Betts, and they'd become a target at that stage of the drug squad, Essex Drug Squad, which is sort of middle tier policing team. In terms of, you know, where they would sit, they were a local problem. They'd come up because of Leah Betts to a middle tier problem, but they were never organised criminals as such. We got involved because of a request from Essex Police. And as I say, Darren Nichols got arrested, Mick Steele, Jack Williams all got arrested in relation to the importation. And as you know, history tells us, Darren Nichols then rolled over in very unusual circumstances, became a supergrass, and his evidence is the evidence that then convicted Michael Steele and Jack Williams. Flip forward, this year I've had nothing to do with them or the case at all. Didn't know much about the case other than obviously what you read in the newspapers. Flip forward to 5 years ago, got contacted by a lady who works with the defence team, who basically asked me what was my feelings around it. I'd spoken to her because of a link to the Balkwell case. Les Balkwell had spoken to the lady and said that, you know, we had integrity, we could be trusted. And so I had a conversation for about 2 hours, and during the course of that conversation, I made it very clear that as far as I was concerned, Mick Steele and Jack Williams was guilty of sin. She asked me if I'd look at some paperwork, which I agreed to do. Didn't do it immediately, took my time, read it, and then as soon as I read it, I started thinking, and it flipped back to what went on at the time, on the day of the arrest, which was very unusual. And then following that, I got asked for some more paperwork, so I can read more and more paperwork, and the more you read into it and the more you see, particularly around the Billy Jasper story, the more you start to ask questions. And the immediate question is, well, why has nobody heard of Billy Jasper? Nobody had heard of Billy Jasper. No one had heard this. I started ringing around all the people I work with on the regional crime squad who should know because they were involved in the job. And I rang round people who were involved in the job, including senior officers, and nobody had heard of this man who'd been arrested 5 weeks after the murders and admitted to being involved. And the people he was talking about are the people that me and Albert separately had spent years investigating, chasing, arresting, convicting. So you start realising and thinking, well, hang on a minute. You've got these two men, Mick Steele and Jack Williams, one of whom's a car mechanic. The other is an importer of cannabis. And then you've got organised crime involved in murders, blackmails, massive drug importations, and huge-scale corruption of police officers. you balance the two together, and then you in the middle sits this character, Billy Jasper. So we started looking at that, and I just immediately thought there's issues here, combined with what I knew from happened on the day, and conversations I then had with some quite senior people who I'd worked with. My back went up. Something's not right. So it seriously wasn't right about the whole thing. So it was coming up for COVID, or it was just a COVID hit, wasn't it? So I knew Albert.
13th of March 2000.
Yeah, so I phoned up Albert, who I'd known historically from after I retired, just before I retired and after I retired, from some work he'd done in relation to a case I was involved in. And I said to Albert, "You've got integrity, Albert. I trust you implicitly. You've done more murder investigations, reviews than anybody else. Can I send you these papers? Can you look at them? You tell me what you think. I'm not going to tell you what I think. You tell me what you think." Sent the papers over to Albert, and Albert took the papers away. And I think you best tell the next bit of the story.
So as I said, March 2000, in COVID, I started reading into the Essex Boys conviction and murder case. And it was quite clear to me that there were huge concerns, having been experienced in murder investigations and did another 15 years in the Met as a civilian homicide review officer. The first question I asked, well, who's reviewed the case? Who's looked at the Essex Boys to support the SIO in the early days? And it was no one. And then when you look at the Jasper account, and had been involved with Supergrass, he'd been accused of corruption by DC Supergrass. So I got all that experience behind me, and it was quite obvious to me that something wasn't right, and there may well have been a huge miscarriage of justice. And so here we are today on the 5th of January 2025, nearly 5 years down the road, having uncovered quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from social media, there's this massive furore on social media, and as I think we discussed before, you know, got lots of noisy people and some quite aggressive people recently who are attacking us personally. And all I would say is we have not earned a bean out of this. This
cost us, David.
It has cost us friendships. It has cost us the friendships of colleagues. It has cost an enormous amount of money and our time. At one stage, Albert was putting in 10, 12-hour days into this for almost a year for no recompense at all. Likewise, huge amount of time and effort for myself. And, you know, those noisy individuals need to wind their neck in, basically, because, you know, I, for one, am getting very, very fed up with the personal attacks. I've had my family threatened over this, and, you know, we're getting to the stage, really. We presented stuff to CCRC. We've done what we can do. But people need to understand, we haven't done this for money. We haven't done this for notoriety. This actually is completely against what we do. I do as a day job. As a day job, we still catch and convict criminals. We don't get criminals out of prison, which is what this effectively is. You know, Mick Steele is a villain, but he didn't kill Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. That is absolutely categorical. I think I can speak for you as well, Al, but, you know, we would not be sitting here today and saying that Mick Steele and Jack Womes are innocent if we didn't 100% believe it. What we've seen, the evidence we've got, some of the new evidence, absolutely categorically proves that Mick Steele and Jack Womes did not commit these murders. The more likely scenario is that given by Jasper. And again, I will say, because a lot of people go on about Billy Jasper and his evidence online, which is we released, I think, 3 years ago, and is now there in the public domain for everyone to see. Nobody has yet undermined his evidence. It's credible, it's now corroborated, and someone keeps making a joke of the word compelling. It is compelling. Billy Jasper is nearer the truth as to what happened on the 6th of December, in fact, the 7th of December, 1995. And I think we'll go through what we can and can't say now, really. So we'll answer the questions.
Yep, so I'm just going to kick off with this question for you. So I understand you had a meeting with the CCRC in August last year. Can you give us some details on how that went, please?
Yeah, I'll start. So sort of going backwards, we, almost from day one, we were writing to Essex Police, the Chief Constable directly. We've never had a response directly from the Chief Constable, that's the first thing to say. There's been a change of Chief Constable since then as well. But we've never had a direct response from the Chief Constable, although that's who we're writing to. We have had responses from his number two and people below him. But we've been writing to him, and basically what Essex Police are saying is, we're not interested in what you've got to say. Tell the CCRC. And then the next stage of that is, of course, we tried to tell the CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission. And the Criminal Cases Review Commission for many years simply turned around and said, we're not prepared to take your evidence from you. And the reason for that is that the system, the actual process, and we've been to see QCs about this, the process does not allow third parties to produce or present evidence to the CCRC. It has to be done through the defence. And the problem we've got is much of the material that we have and had is confidential. Much of it is material that's come from certain surveillance techniques, and it's not stuff that we will be happy to share, and we wouldn't be happy to share the details of who's told us a lot of this information, not with the defence. We'd happily sit down with CCRC, we'd happily sit down with the police, but Essex Police won't talk to us. And the other big issue around this is corruption. There is this stream of corruption that runs through this case. So we've got real concerns. So we always want to talk direct to the Chief Constable because, you know, you would hope that he is not corrupt and that you can talk to him. We wouldn't have that opportunity, and for years we couldn't talk to CCRC. That all changed. We wrote a report to the CCRC, and through the back door, effectively, through the head of the CCRC, Helen Pitcher, we actually got a response, and give Mrs. Pitcher her due. She offered to read the material. She read the material. It obviously caused a bit of furore because we then got contacted by the CCRC directly, and as a result of communication with the CCRC, we ended up having a meeting up in Birmingham. We both attended. We were there for about 3-4 hours. And it was not a meeting whereby they started the meeting by saying, we will not tell you anything. They wouldn't give us any information. They were there simply to listen to what we had to say to them. It had broken the process, if you like, because we were a third party. We're not the defence. And so we were able to put over some of the material we've got, went through our report, and also identified our concerns about the convictions. And as a result of that, they then contacted the defence, and they've reopened a new review. That's as far as we know. From that stage forwards, we haven't really heard any more, have we?
I think it's fair to say it was a good meeting. We met the case officer who was new to the case. He hadn't dealt with any other applications, and the commissioner had flown over from Northern Ireland. So it was a 3-hour meeting. I kept asking questions like, well, how long is this going to take you, and can we still talk about the case? And they wouldn't give an answer either way. So it wasn't a lot of information coming from the CCRC, which I accept because that's the rules and that's the way it is. But at least the report is now being accepted as a fresh application. The defence team have supported that, and it's a case of watch this space. The last application took 3 years. Okay, COVID got in the way. I'd be interested to guesstimate as to how long our application will take. I would say probably another year. What I would like out of it is either straight to the Court of Appeal, an application, the referral to the Court of Appeal, or a focus reinvestigation. You can review it until the cows come home, but it needs to drill down into the hard, true facts of this case and look at the raw material that we haven't seen personally. We've only seen, obviously, copies of it. So that's where, as an experienced review officer, it really does need a focus reinvestigation. And mentally, I have made notes of what recommendations that I would have made if I had reviewed this case, and we can talk about them if necessary. So I think we've answered that question, David.
Yeah, well, I think the important thing here is that what this case actually needs now is detectives, experienced detectives, to investigate it with a warrant card in their pocket, because the reality is people need arresting, and unfortunately, many of the things that you would be dealing with now are issues that should have been dealt with back in 1996. Billy Jasper, for instance, the interviews with Billy Jasper are appalling. Stuff around what does the Met hold as intelligence and disclosure material. We all know Billy Jasper was a registered police informant. What do they know about Billy Jasper? What do they know about the material that he was putting forward at the time? There's other investigations and operations that were run at the time that potentially would also have material related to them. The premises down at Silvertown Way, not the gym. There was an operation being run there at the time. Now, if Billy Jasper is correct in what he's saying, there may well be cameras or camera footage, CCTV footage from covert cameras showing his car turning up or his car leaving, etc. All that material exists. There's 3,003 crates of material sitting within the Metropolitan Police somewhere with all that material. Never been disclosed. That's not in this case, but that's just never been disclosed, full stop. Admitted to the Home Affairs Select Committee. So there is a lot of material sitting somewhere that has all the answers to this case, and not just this case, many other cases. But it needs a detective with a warrant card to be able to go and knock on people's doors, nick them, search premises and do what's necessary.
It sounds like quite a positive thing then. If someone fresh who's not used to the case is looking at it now, it might change things, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, another question for you here. You've spent a considerable amount of time putting together a victim and suspect timeline. What has that uncovered, please?
I'll leave that with Albert.
Yeah. How long have we got, Lee, is a big question. I covered a lot, and will probably take a day and a half, 3 days to get the point over. But can I just summarise where I see the issues are for me in relation to the timeline, which is crucial in this case. I'll just concentrate between 5 and 7 p.m. Done a lot of work, done a lot of research, and I know from having read the documents, this is where I'm coming from. The distance from Willamere Caravan Park to Marks Tay is 12.4 miles. And Jack Williams, in his evidence and from his cell site, puts him within reach of the BBC mast at 12 minutes past 5, 17:12. For me, Williams could not have been anywhere near Marks Tay until after 17:35, and that's based on the distance and the travel time. So that's point one. Jack Williams was in Sudbury at 12 minutes past 5, and he could not have been in Marks Tay, as Nicholl says, at just after 5.
I think that's I think the important point here is everybody seems to have missed that, including defence. Even now we're still talking to them about it, and they don't seem to get it. It really is that simple. If the call data is correct, if it's correct, and everybody else is pushing and saying it's correct, if the call data is correct, Jack Williams' call, 12 minutes past 5, he is at or very close to Willamere Caravan Park near Sudbury in Suffolk.
Correct.
Right? Get it. 12 minutes past, he is there, categorically.
So the whole case stops.
So if you take that as the grounding point for your call, and that data is correct, how can Jack Williams be 10 minutes earlier, unless he's a time traveller, be at Marks Tay?
Right.
It's impossible. It's utterly impossible. He cannot be at Marks Tay at 5 o'clock to meet Mick Steele and Darren Nichols, because he is 12 and a half miles away. And importantly, this isn't a main road. This is back roads to get there. Pulling a trailer, if he's true in what he's saying, you're talking at least 21, 22 minutes away.
Yeah.
Right. So he's got. If you start at that as your baseline, 12 minutes past 5, Jack Williams is categorically in Sudbury in Suffolk. He cannot be in Essex. So from anything that anybody talks about after that, halfway house at 6:30, here, there, rubbish, utter rubbish, cannot be correct. You have to all go back to 12 minutes past 5.
And for me, an important one is, if I've read all the interviews, Nichols has never been asked about this call. Okay, it wasn't him, but the interviewing officers had all the data in front of them, scheduled JMW1 or 2, whatever it is. So why didn't they put, okay, but we've got Wooms who says he was at the caravan park at just after 5, so who's right? So that wasn't put in. Small point, but there are other points we can put. So move on.
Just before you do move on,
yeah,
I think it's really important, because this is where everything starts to fall apart at the interview stage. You've got interview 1, interview 2, which forget about them, they're all about drugs.
No comment, yeah.
Third interview is effectively the unlawful interview down the cell with Barrington and the 2 officers. Okay, unlawful, not tape recorded, breach of pace, no solicitor present. That's the bit where suddenly everything changes. From that point on, he doesn't have a solicitor. He starts admitting things. But the important point around it is there is a conversation takes place. And if you look at the conversation that takes place and you look at the notes that are then presented to the other officers who then interview Steele, they are talking about earlier times or later times. The times are all mixed up. And it's not until I think they had a scrum down that they suddenly thought, hang on, none of this makes sense. Nichols, in his 4th interview, talks about a later time, which means he cannot make it in time.
David, it gets worse than that.
Yeah.
This is all about the meet time at Mark's Tay.
Yeah.
He doesn't give any time for Mark's Tay until his first witness statement after all the interviews under caution. Okay, we've seen notes where clearly officers who are going to interview Steele and Wooms have been given times, and they make it 6 o'clock. So you're talking about, was it 5 o'clock? Was it 6 o'clock? Or what time was it? So, we've drilled down into this, and it's taken a lot of time checking custody records and all the notes that we have had from the defence team. So there's a huge concern around, is Nichols telling the truth from dot one? And that, for us, the answer is no.
No, absolutely. And I've thrown it up on the screen. I've just done the check because I think it's quite relevant. We've had snow overnight. It's nowhere near as bad as the weather would have been on the 6th of December. But if you look at that, there is snow and it's raining. Minimum times there, 26 minutes, 29, 28 minutes. That's today in not similar weather, but it's not nice weather out there today. 6th of December would have been far worse. How does Jack Womes get from Sudbury to Marks Tay for 5 o'clock when he's 12 minutes past 5, he's in Sudbury? It's impossible.
In a rundown, beaten up B registration Passat, it's got an oil leak.
And pulling a trailer. Potentially.
Also, as well, like nowadays, the new A130's there, so a lot of the traffic would be on that road. So it would have been twice the time, probably.
This is such an important point. It's such an important point, and everybody seems to have missed it. He can't be at 2 places at one time. Correct. It's impossible.
Just move on to the next one. This is about Michael Steele. His case is that he was at the Ardley petrol station, which is not too far away from Marks Tay, and at 1 minute past 5, he buys petrol and he gets a receipt that's produced at trial. The distance is 11 miles, and it takes 18 minutes, and I did that on Google Map and a route planner in December 22. So still, if he was at the petrol station, which I believe he was with his wife, couldn't have got to Marks Tay until just before 5:30. So you've got Rooms, who's up in Sudbury, can't get to Marks Tay until gone 5:30, and you've got Steele, who's at Ardley, buying petrol, then dropping off to buy some food, can't get to Marks Tay until just before 5:30. Okay, so there's a discrepancy in Nichols' account of the alleged meet time for him with Steele and Wilms. So we'll move it on. The next one is Nichols says that he got into Steele's Toyota Hilux and he was driven down to the pub car park at the halfway house. Now that distance, yes, is, let me just check the distance so we can give the facts, is 37 miles. I've driven that, yeah, and it's a bloody long way. Yeah, okay, conditions probably not the same as they were on the 6th of December. Yeah, but it took us 52 minutes. So it took us 45 minutes when we did it. But when Nichols did it with DC Brown and Winston, it took them 52 minutes. So when you look at, depends on what leave time it is, but was it 10 minutes past 5? And it has to be 10 minutes past 5 for Steele to have got to the car park, to have made the Crown's case calls at 18:03 and 18:09 when they say that he was in the car park at the halfway house when he's sells out bounced off Childeridge just over the hill. So something not right there. So we've got a concern around where Steele was, yeah, and he could not, for us, if he had made a journey, have got to the car park at the time the Crown say he was to make those two calls. So hopefully that's clear. We'll now move on to Darren Nichols, and if we can put this one up, David, in a second. This is the halfway house pub car park, yeah, to the Rettendon Turnpike at Workhouse Lanes. That makes sense, i.e. the Nichols and Wilms journey. And this is a distance of 12 miles. And Nichols, in his interview under caution, says on at least 2 occasions that he left at 6:30, 18:30, when he saw the Range Rover turn up and park next to Michael Steele's Hilux. And that was the Range Rover where his understanding was it was Tate, at least Tate, Tucker and Rolf were there to meet Michael Steele. So that is a distance of 21 minutes, yes, as I've said, yeah, a distance, and that's how long it took, and he got there would have got there at 18:51. Yeah. So arrival time at the top of the lane for rooms to be dropped off and then walk down the lane to wait in the bushes, as per the Crown's case, is 18:51. Okay, here we go. So that is for Nichols and rooms off to the top of Workhouse Lane. Let's talk about the victims. Essex Police did nothing about checking the Range Rover's movements for the 6th and 7th of December. We clearly have, and when we've looked at what is in the Holmes account and from witness statements, very briefly, Donna Jaggers says that at 17:45, Craig Rolfe dropped her off at Lakeside to buy a new dress. Donna Garwood, who's Tony Tucker's living girlfriend, at 6 o'clock, 1800, said she saw Craig Rolfe arrive at the bungalow in Fobbing, and Tucker got into the Range Rover and they drove off. We've now got new evidence from one of the girlfriends of Pat Tate to say that she saw the Range Rover drive away from 49 Gordon Road, the home address of Pat Tate, at what has got to be 1808, because we know from the landline telephone data that 1806 Pat was talking to the girlfriend's mother to say they were going to be late. So we know from the telephone data that the departure time from 49 Gordon Road when she sees all 3 of them in the Range Rover is 1808. The next sighting is at the Basildon Tire Company, where we've got Andrew Reynolds in his witness statement says that he saw all 3 of them just coming towards or passing him as he was off home. And he gave the time as 1805. He is clearly wrong, and from the drive time and analysis I have done, it's got to be closer to 1814, because it takes 5 to 6 minutes to get from Gordon Road to the roundabout where Basildon Tire Company is, And then the next sighting is at 18:30, where Nichols says he saw the Range Rover turn up. We have driven that distance, and it actually, years later when we did it, it could have been done quicker. So the very earliest it could have been at the halfway house car park, if they did go there, was 1826. Interestingly, Pat Tate on his mobile is calling Paul Edwards at 1826, and Essex Police have never spoken to, never interviewed, never arrested, never questioned Paul Edwards. So the simple question for us is, well, why not? You've got a key witness, or a key suspect who's never been seen. And that would have nailed down, if we knew where he was, if he said on the phone. And we also know that there was a VW Polo black one in at Basil Tire Company that Pat Tate and Andrew Reynolds had agreed between them to get it fixed, and it was gone later that night. So did Pat Tate go and pick up the VW Polo, and at 1826 was he actually in the Polo and driving it off either down to Southend or down to the Prince of Wales pub in Ockenden where Paul Edwards was. So grey areas and lack of proper investigation to establish where the victims were before they were murdered. So 1826. So 1830 for me is a time that you can base the next movements on in relation to how long did it get to the murder scene for the victims. So we'll talk through that now.
Can I just add two bits in there, just while you're talking about that? The Essex Police did try to interview Paul Edwards. They sent him a message saying, will you come in and be interviewed? And his solicitor responded saying no. At which point, in that day and age, your expectation would have been his front door would have been put through, it would have been nicked, and everything around it would have been seized. How you didn't nick him, or how they didn't nick him at the time, is one of those questions that you just sit there and think, why? It's just off the charts. Why?
Edwards worked for Blinkenwell, Tony Tucker. He did his money. Yeah, he was. Our information was that he was involved in the background of the Prince of Wales pub, and we also
we have a document which we've never disclosed called Document 196, which is a summary of all the intelligence that came into the murder squad throughout the entire period. And there's
bits missing.
There's loads of stuff.
Jasper's account's not in there.
Jasper's account's not in there, but there is loads and loads of material in there. Just about every villain in London is in there as having murdered Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. Most of it not been investigated. But what is important to say is Paul Edwards' name comes up repeatedly in there. So they tried to speak to him first of all, and he said, no, go away, don't want to talk to you, through his solicitor. And they didn't do anything, but his name keeps coming up. So why did nobody at any stage turn around and say, actually, I think we do actually need to go around and nick him or speak to him? No one's ever spoken to him. No one. Raises a massive question again.
3 calls that day to the victims. Okay, we'll move on to the next one, and this is now the suspect.
Sorry to jump again, just while you're on that, because I've spoken to Lizzie Fletcher numerous times.
She drove the black Polo.
And there is a big question mark around the Polo, right? There is another point that came out of this as well in the material, and from talking to Lizzie Fletcher, there were bullet holes. The reason that Polo went into the garage was actually to repair bullet holes in the rear. Someone had shot at Pat Tate in that car previously. So there's a question there, never got, and Essex Police knew that. That's something that Essex Police knew. So why didn't they ever investigate that?
Perhaps that's why Andrew Reynolds won't pick up the phone and talk to us.
Exactly. But importantly, someone, as Albert sort of didn't gloss over, but someone picked that car up. She had that car the next morning because she drove to work in it the next morning. She didn't collect it, and it was gone by, what time was it, 8 o'clock?
It was near 9 o'clock.
Yeah, it was gone
on his way.
So between the period that
just after
the Range Rover was seen near the garage with Tucker, Tate and Rolfe in, And when he comes back later that evening, that polo has been picked up and has gone. The keys have been left under the
in the glove box.
in the glove box. So someone collected it. It wasn't Lizzie Fletcher. We would suggest it was probably Pat Tate.
Yeah.
And then you go back to this whole question mark as to why Essex Police won't release version 1 of Pat Tate's data, call data. You know, will that call data that they do have, that they will not disclose, that they've buried, does that material show that Pat Tate was still alive after 1859 and maybe was moving around at that time?
And also, when Lizzie Fletcher made her statement, the officer who took it was a lady detective, she put a note with the statement to say, doesn't believe she's telling the whole truth, may be worth another visit. Never went back and saw her. So you've got an officer who's taken a statement, who has got that gut feeling, as you do in an investigation. You know, she's got more to say. And she was close. You know, she went out to Amsterdam, out to Holland with Pat Tate to get the money back on the bad cannabis deal. So lots of concerns and questions that I'm, you know, get annoyed about because they're not doing the bloody job right.
And one other thing, I think it's going off at a tangent, but when we were talking to Lizzie, someone else who we all know was also trying to talk to Lizzie and was telling her to shut down, keep her mouth shut.
Yep.
You ask yourself why.
As we say, we'll move on from that one, David.
Yeah.
Okay, then, so we've now got the victims and the suspect, which is Steele, which is the movement from the halfway house car park to the Hungry Horse. Right. And this distance is via the 127 and the old A130 and then the 129 down to the Hungry Horse is 11.9 miles, nearly the same distance to the top of the lane. So the Crown's case is that Steele has convinced or chatted or agreed with Tucker Tate and Rolfe to follow him, and he takes them to the Hungry Horse. And that distance, as I've said, is 11.5 miles. We did it in December 21, and it took us 60 minutes. The defence team, believe it or not, have done this same process in 1996, and it took them 25 minutes. So there's a discrepancy there for me, so I haven't relied on the defence timings, but I haven't relied on any of them in this analysis, but I just flagged that up as how long it was recorded by the defence team. Essex Police, as I said, didn't do this journey, which was crucial, which was, here we have Nichols saying, that they must have made that journey because of what happened later, because they went back there to pick the Hilux up. They get to the car park, Steele gets into the back of the Range Rover, and it goes off to the crime scene, to the 5-bar gate down the bottom of the lane. Putting all that together, with the departure time of the halfway house of just after 6:30, make it 18:31, and the distance it takes means that, they don't get to the crime scene, until 1847. Just let me recap, because I've got a lot of timings that I've referred to here. This is a departure time of 1847, 1848, and then it takes 10 minutes to get to the top of the lane and a minute down to. So the arrival time, the arrival time is 18. So departure time 1831, and using the quickest, which I said, it gives an arrival time of 1847 for Steele, Tate, Tuck and Rolfe to arrive at the Hungry House, allowing at least a minute for Steele to allegedly get his boiler suit on, his wellies on and his gloves on, but I make a joke of that, but anyway, that's what allegedly happened, to get in the back of a Range Rover, departing at 1848. 10 minutes up the road, and it gets them there at 1858. That leaves 1 minute for them to murder all three, so rooms to come out of the bushes for them to murder them, because at 1859, he's ringing to come and get me. It just doesn't fit. 1 minute to murder three men, fire 8 shots, move around the back of the Range Rover. It just doesn't fit. What's interesting is that if they'd done this exercise, they would have realised that it didn't fit. But Nichols was able to, I'll use the word, convince the judge and the jury that at 1844, when Pat Tate received a call from Sarah Saunders on his mobile, they were driving into the top of the lane at 1844. So when you look at it, he wasn't, he was driving, hadn't even reached the Hungry Horse, but that's what the jury heard, which gave them the time to be down the lane and a 10-minute gap before the murders take place. So 1844 is wrong. And then when you look at the cell site, and it shortly we'll see that you couldn't have got a signal from the Hungry Horse or the route that he had taken to get there. So another huge concern. Yeah. And also when you look at Darren Nichols and Jack Woombs' time, they got there after the Range Rover was down the lane. So if anybody in the incident room or in the interviewing teams way back in 96 had just sat down and done what I have done, they would have picked up on all the holes, and they would have gone back to Nichols and said, "Okay, let's go and drive it. Let's go and get the Range Rover out or get a vehicle out and do what I have done." And support it with David, because we did it on the Sky documentary, and identify the huge concerns that there are. This didn't happen. Nichols is lying. Some of his evidence is the truth, like booking in a hotel in Amsterdam and all that stuff. But when it comes to the hard reality of 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., yeah, it doesn't fit. And one last point. At 1848, Nichols, remember, he's still en route, doesn't get to the top lane until 1851, checks his phone, his answer phone on his mobile phone, 1848, he's still en route, yes, and he's nowhere near what his evidence tells him, and it pings off Rettendon cell site mast. So he's in the area, and he has made a check on his voicemail at 1848, but it's never cleared up an interview, never ever been properly investigated, and it's just not acceptable.
I think the point is that, you know, that they from day one they believed that Mickey Steele was guilty, and we know the reasons why that happened, because of two people who had been two informants who had been giving information and said it was Mickey the pilot. And from that point on, they become blinkered. And then obviously with this, you ended up on that day, once Nichols had been arrested for the importation, once he'd rolled over, that was it. As far as they were concerned, they'd achieved their aim. And everything else went out the window. All common sense went out the window. As far as they were concerned, Nichols was telling the truth. They believed him. And they even charged Steele and Woombs with the murders before any witness statements had been taken, which is bonkers. It's like off the charts bonkers. You know, why wouldn't you test his evidence before you charge people with murder? They didn't. They charged with murder. And of course, once you've done that, that's it. You're in a tunnel. You've got a choice then. Once you start to realise, actually, Nichols is telling lies, we've got a road backwards, we've got to stop this. You either stop it, or you then have to start coaching, putting the bricks in the building to try and create this monster. And that's what they did. Unfortunately, sadly, some very good policemen believed Mick Steele was guilty and give him a leg up. I think that some very good policemen were misled, manipulated, evidence was manufactured, and they did what they thought was right. They coached Darren Nichols to get the conviction, and it was wrong, completely and utterly wrong, and they were wrong. And to be honest, that's why many of them will not talk to us. And these are people I know very well, people I've worked with, decent, honest cops. They won't talk. They've all shut down. They all want to keep their mouths quiet because they know how bad this is.
Just a quick question there from me. So, do you think if, obviously, the police officers you're talking about only dealt with that case from the evidence that was in front of them, if they were given the full evidence that you guys have uncovered now, do you think they would have thought this differently?
Listen, I've spoken to them. I've spoken to people who are that close to this case. They'd never heard of Billy Jasper. How is it that the SIO, Ivan Dibley, has never heard of Billy Jasper? The DI, unfortunately, she's passed away. She ended up as an assistant chief constable. The DI who wrote the entries in the decision log, she's never heard of Billy Jasper. How have any of these people not heard of Billy Jasper?
His signature's on there saying that he's agreed the content of
the handwritten notes in the decision log. I'll put them on the board in a minute. That's her writing. She said, I don't remember that. I don't remember him. How can you not remember a man who's admitted the murders? This is months before Darren Nichols ever gets arrested. This man is in custody in Raleigh police station, and he's sitting there saying, my life is in danger. I want to tell you, I was a driver. I drove this man to the scene. He committed the murders, blah, blah. He gives the whole story, detailed story. And yet not one person remembers him, knows anything about it. It's bonkers. It's like off the charts madness. There's apart from the interviews that we've got, apart from the 12-page handwritten statement that we've got that he wrote out himself overnight, there's no custody record for him. There's no documents, nothing. There's nothing.
The officer who first spoke to him, he should have had a statement taken.
Absolutely.
And that should have been in the system for us to read.
The Met officer who first dealt with...
DC Vernon, who
first dealt with Billy Jasper at Forest Gate Police Station. So Billy Jasper gets arrested for armed robbery, a series of robberies, and he asked to speak to his handler, which was Rowley Baker, DC Rowley Baker. Rowley Baker's not available, so he goes for a cigarette in the backyard with Gareth Vernon, who's a DC, and he immediately tells Gareth about this story. This is what happened. My life's in danger. I'm going to get murdered. I need to go to police protective custody. Tells the story. Gareth Vernon phones up Essex Police and says, this is a man in custody. You need to come talk to him. They come down. He gets interviewed. He gets taken out to the scene, and then gets brought back, interviewed again, and then they take him off to Raleigh Police Station for a 3-day lay down, and he obviously gets interviewed. Pretty poor interviews, incredibly poor interviews over a period of time, and at the last knockings, he then goes out and asks time to the scene. But he admits it all, and yet no one remembers that. And the two officers who did do the interviews, which was Sanford and Chappell, refused to talk to us. Shut down completely. Will not talk to anybody. Even people who they work with for years, who we are talking to, have tried to speak to them and say to them, you do need to come forward and explain what went on. No. Cut them off completely. Why? What is that?
Isn't it? It's like they're hiding something.
Stinks. Utterly stinks. If you've got nothing to hide, policemen are strange characters. They tend to talk. They tend to come out and talk because they want to tell war stories and everything else. In this case, they don't. Everybody wants to shut down. It's bizarre. So the whole Billy Jasper story, effectively, there's nothing anywhere. You can't find it anywhere. Apart from the interviews and everything else, it doesn't exist. I'm sure we'll come on to it, but, that's our starting point. The first point is Darren Nichols telling lies. Yes, absolutely, categorically. Darren Nichols lied his backside off. Why? That's another question mark. The second bit, is the Billy Jasper story or another story true? Highly likely. But the one thing that does run, the theme of this is Mick Steele didn't kill Tucker Tate and Rolfe. Jack Womes didn't kill Tucker Tate and Rolfe. Were they involved in it at all? Very much doubt it. We've spoken to both. I think if either of them had half a clue as to what really had gone on, we would have been told something. They've never told their defence anything. They've never made any admissions to anybody throughout the entire period. They could have been out of prison years ago. Particularly Mick Steele could have been out years ago, couldn't he? Yeah. He won't.
If you look at Jack Wombs' interviews, every time it comes, and I've said this before, but I'll repeat it because I think it's important. Every time it comes to drugs, no comment. Every time it comes to a question of murder, he actually talks. Yeah, and we've got they're available for it. I'm not sure probably need to check with the defence team, but they are available to see that Jack Wombs does give an account of what Nichols has said. So he's not just blanking him, no comment. He has given an answer. So I just look at that thinking, well, he's talking about it. We need to drill down into what has happened here. And in relation to, and let me just give you my personal view on, they would use the word compelling, but Billy Jasper. Billy Jasper goes back into the history of Canning Town. He's part of the Canning Town cartel. He lived in the same street as some heavy people, and he's been at it all his life. People who've served time with Billy Jasper have given comments on social media. D.C. Rowley Baker, who was one of my officers when I was a detective superintendent in the East End of London, dealing with the Canning Town outfit, had him as an informant. I was the registrar, so I haven't got personally now any great knowledge of it because it was too long ago. But let's get it right. Jasper gave an account that had some names and detail that required a proper investigation. They didn't even put it in the intelligence schedule. They didn't even go and check out Jasper. And I've said already, CCTV, mobile phone evidence, the fingerprints that were allegedly checked at the crime scene but have come back negative. In fairness to D.S. Sanford, he has done something, putting in an office of information, so that's in the system, but nothing followed on from there. Jasper, I don't think, has told everything that he knew, but from the new witnesses that we've spoken to, we believe that the Jasper account is more likely the truth of the 6/7th of December than anything that Nichols said about Steele and Wooms. Simple as that. Was he telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I don't think so. He's been locked away just as long as Steele and Wooms, and his family have told me personally, that he doesn't want to talk because he's had enough. He's been let down, and he just wants to get on with his life. Do you blame him? Yeah.